Good morning. It is Wednesday, August 4th. I am independent journalist Georgia Ford in for Ben Dixon. This morning, it's important for us to have a conversation as parents are beginning to feel like they have no other choice but then to send their children back to school. It's fall in some states. We know that schools are already beginning to resume, and up north, school will resume next month. So what are your options when you know that your children are going to be in classrooms filled with other kids who haven't been vaccinated? What does that mean for your family's health? What does that mean for the pandemic? And truly, are there any other options? That brings us to our guest this morning, Anthony Galloway, Dr. Mack, and Adrienne Ashby. Adrienne, I want to begin with you because this is your first time on the show, and also because you have been homeschooling your children for nearly a decade, correct?
Yes, that's right. We started in 2012, and this will be our 10th year homeschooling.
And I know for some parents that might feel intimidating, taking that on. Could you just, for those who have never tried to homeschool but are finding themselves kind of like in a rock and a hard place and really don't want to send their kids back, can you just share with them how you and your husband arrived at the decision to homeschool and how you guys have found so much success in doing so?
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Georgia. We started homeschooling in 2012, but honestly, I researched it probably 4 years before that, just because that's the type of person that I am. I needed to convince myself that this was doable. And so the main reason I started was that I'd met some homeschoolers when we lived in the Atlanta area. I met homeschooling families, and I just really thought that their kids were great. Their kids got along with my kids. And my oldest is a boy, and he was, I think, in kindergarten at the time. And I was concerned about the plight of Black boys in public schools. And I wanted to try to figure out what other options he might have or we might have for his education. And so that was the reason that we started this whole thing. I started researching. And ultimately, when we moved back to Virginia in 2012, I was able to start homeschooling when my oldest by that time was in 5th grade, and then my middle child was in 3rd grade, and my youngest, I think, was 3 or 4 at that time. So he was actually still going to preschool.
And you have since, raised your kids. You guys have done homeschooling. They are now off to college. Can you share with us some of the achievements that they've made that you're most proud of?
Sure. The biggest achievement, I think, is that I feel like my son, who graduated in 2020, went out into the world. So our mission for our homeschool, our mission statement is to develop young adults who love God and their neighbor and who are prepared to engage the world with compassion, creativity, and critical insight. So that's what we're trying to do here in our homeschool. And so I feel like we launched our first kid off, and I feel like he had those qualities: compassion, creativity, and critical insight. He actually got an appointment to the United States Coast Guard Academy. So we just dropped him off on June 28th. We dropped him off at the U.S. Coast Guard Academy in New London, Connecticut. He applied to 11 schools, 11 colleges, and he got into 9 of them. So a lot of people would call that success, and it is success of a type. It lets us know that his education didn't suffer by homeschooling. But the things that I think people don't see is that he's the kid that we get reports back saying, Solomon really helped out his classmates. He took the lead when something needed, to be done. All of those things. That was part of what we were trying to build here while we were homeschooling.
Now, Adrienne, as your children were advancing, let's say you started 5th, 6th grade, at what point did you know that they had passed or mastered the requirements to move from one grade to another? And then ultimately, when it came to college, did they SAT, ACT? So just tell us, how did you all understand the mastery of moving from one grade to the next? And then even how you developed the curriculum, or did you find the curriculum somewhere?
So in Virginia, and each state differs. Each state has its own homeschooling laws. In Virginia, we're required to test our children or have them evaluated by a licensed teacher every year. So for my kids, I always gave them every year the Iowa test of basic skills, which I know some people probably remember from when they were in school, which is a nationally normed standardized test. And so I would give them that test at the end of the year, get the results back and send that into the school district. And we would get the results back and see, they would break down for math and language arts, what percentile your children were in, so compare it to the national, all the kids who took the test at that time, what percentile they were in. So that gave us good feedback. And it also gave us language to speak with people who may not understand homeschooling. Most people understand standardized test results. When it came to college admission, what we did, so when you homeschool, you're sort of the guidance counselor, you're the principal, you're the teacher, you're the lunch lady, you're the whole thing. And so in preparing for my son to go to college, we did the PSAT just as people do. We did the PSAT, we had him sit for the SAT, and I had to keep records of every course that we taught at home and keep detailed descriptions of that course, because unlike people who go to school with homeschoolers, if I say I taught my child Algebra 1, they want to see a description of the course. The colleges, they want to see the title of the book that we used or any resources that we used. So I had probably about a 12-page course description, like you would see in colleges. This course will teach these things, and a transcript. And so we had to create that. I have one now for my daughter who's 17. So we're in the process. She's going to be applying to colleges in the fall. So we're in the process of keeping those. And I hired another homeschool mom, Black homeschool mom, who specializes in college counseling for homeschoolers. So she was able to take all of the information that I gleaned over the years about my son and turn it into something that colleges understand. So by the time it was time for college admissions, we had a nice packet that we could submit to colleges in a way that they understood it.
Now, I feel like for some people, this might, feel really intimidating. And Anthony, I'd love to hear from you on this. When you think about going back to school, right, there's this concern of children not being vaccinated and what that means for our kids, what that means for our communities, and what that means for us as parents. There's so many parents out here who are busy juggling their careers and can't imagine taking this type of burden on, but are also now looking at, oh my goodness, I don't want my kids to go to school either. And what you've shared with us, Adrienne, is maybe it's not a burden at all. Maybe this is something that would really produce dividends, not only for our children's futures, but for us as well. Anthony, you as a father who, you're facing the same decision, what is this bringing up for you?
Well, also as a father and as a minister, one of the things that I'm finding is that more people are making this choice, and that people have been making this choice for a long time. I think, Sister Adrienne, one of the things that you've just done excellently is debunk some of the myths that folks have out there about homeschooling. Myths that homeschool kids are less prepared. They don't stay on track with their public school or private school counterparts. They don't go to college. None of those things are true. In fact, we see pretty much the opposite of that, and so as a father, for us, this is a serious option that we're thinking about because our kids are younger than the vaccination age. They're both under 12. And so, they did not enjoy last year's online schooling as much as everybody was trying to make happen, did not work for them. And so we would much rather follow the direction of some of our friends and colleagues, and about 20% of the Center for the African Diaspora that I run, 20% of the parents in that program at that center are homeschool, and they use our center for the companion enrichment. So it's a serious option that we're really considering for this year, at least for the portion of the year before they can get vaccinated, at least. The other piece of that is here in the state of Minnesota where we live, there's a whole lot of resources. In fact, there's a whole department of homeschool in our Department of Education. education. So another myth that Sister Adrienne, I'm so glad that you debunked, is that somehow when you homeschool, that there is no connection with other school entities. And here, at least in the state of Minnesota, that's just not true. And so, I think it's not only a viable option for many of the families in my circle, it's the only option and the best option. The only other thing that I'll add to that is one of the things that we've seen alleviated with our students, not necessarily, particularly students of color, in particular Black and Indigenous students here in Minnesota, is that a lot of the other situations that our students find in school racially were not experienced this past year. And I've seen a huge benefit to my children's mental health, not having to navigate a school where, in addition to all of the excellence that they want to strive for, they also have to deal with the racialized incidents that are happening at their school as well. So there's just so many checkboxes being marked on our direction towards homeschooling.
So Brother Anthony and Sister Adrienne, and I'm with Georgia, Adrienne, as you were describing what you were doing, I'm like, my Lord, I'm a mechanical engineer, and I just don't think that I could have dealt with that. So in going through all that you went through, are there financial resources? I know for kids that go to public schools, there's so much money that's allocated per school. Given that states are recognizing homeschools, are there financial resources to help you all as parents if a parent elects to go down the route of homeschooling?
In the state of Virginia, there are not, but I know at least one state, that state is Alaska, where I think families get $1,500 a year that they can use toward homeschooling, and that can include extracurriculars, dance classes, art classes. It can include curriculum. One thing I will say, when the COVID pandemic happened in 2020, a lot of Black parents started thinking about this homeschooling thing. And so in various Facebook groups I was in, people were passing my name around. I think I was contacted by no less than 30 Black parents who were seeking information about how to homeschool their children last summer. And what I always told them was that really homeschooling is just a part of our lives. Like, from the time your kids are born, you're actually educating them as you walk along the way. Like you're not saying, okay, we're going to talk about math, but you're cooking and you're saying, look, I'm taking 1/4 teaspoon of this and 1/4 teaspoon of that. That's math, even though it doesn't sound like it is, even though they're not sitting at a desk. So I would tell people, and we had lots of people contact me who were full-time, both parents working full-time and trying to figure out how they could do it. But because everyone was home because of the pandemic, people really didn't have a choice. And so their question was, do I do the online thing that the school is offering, or do I figure out a way to make the learning come alive more with homeschooling? And so that's what I started getting in the habit of walking people through. And I would ease their minds by saying, start out with just language arts and math. Don't worry about bringing in all of the other things. Just start out really slowly. But even before you start out with all the academics, start getting to know your child. Figuring out what makes that child tick. Because when our kids are away from us for 8 hours a day, that's time we're not figuring out who they are. They're not getting to figure out who we are. And so take some time to get to know your kids. COVID really taught us that there is no rush for all of this, right? If your kid has to take their time through a math subject, let them. That's what homeschooling allows them. They're not competing against the person next to them to make sure that they finish the assignment as fast. They're learning at their own pace.
Okay, and to both of you, let's say you're struggling with a certain subject as a parent, math, science, chemistry, whatever it is. What did you do in the cases of subjects that you didn't feel you had a mastery of, yet you're now trying to teach this particular course?
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, for as the kids got older, we had them test into community college. So my oldest son did several math, starting with pre-calculus at community college. He did his physics at community college. For the younger kids, let's just say if I wasn't really interested, like art has never been my strong suit at home. We joined a co-op, a homeschool co-op, which is basically a collective of parents who get together and say, you know what? For example, I taught U.S. government. I'm an attorney, so I taught U.S. government at that co-op. But another mom who's a math specialist taught my son math, and another mom taught French. And so it's sort of a pooling of resources that went on so that the kids are still getting what they want, and they're getting taught by someone who loves the subject. And I'm not having to do it. I'm just sort of in the background coaching that part. Go ahead, Anthony. Sorry about that.
Well, I was just gonna co-sign you because with the center that I run, one of the things that we do is we coordinate pods, and so it was easy actually in the transition to the online learning because we already had these pods that were already set up, and so during the day we open up our center, and there are folks who use the center to do the co-op work that you just described, in addition to just meeting up. And what I also found really interesting about that, not just the community college plug you just made. Here in Minnesota, we have quite a bit of community colleges, and so that just works. But we also have a robust PSEO, post-secondary education options process here in Minnesota as well, and we find a huge number of homeschool kids take advantage of that. But the other piece that comes along with that, in to your question, Dr. Mack, is how many teachers that we actually find in the cohorts themselves. So folks either who have taught for a while. We also have folks, aunts and uncles and things like that, who had been teachers, who may have retired, who can drop in for one class because they miss it so much. There's a plethora of resources that I just through the parents who are utilizing these pods at our center, finding that this resource was there. I would also add, and I think you alluded to this a little bit, being in there, just coaching in the background. There is also this nexus of parents getting to talk to each other about so many other issues and things like that were coming up. It was actually a very much a cooperative model, not just from the education side, but also to the mental health. There are parents in there who were psychologists. There are parents who were youth specialists and developers. And so they were able to put together these opportunities that, quite frankly, I was a little jealous of, because my kids were going to full-time school when I first learned about these pods. And then we were able to access them when we were online, to the point where our kids actually enjoyed that part. And whenever time came for the online portion with school, we'd see that tank. We'd see their energy tank. We'd see their will tank and all of those things. And so mommy math class was so much more enjoyable than the one online.
Love it. And Adrienne, I'm curious to know from you, because you started homeschooling well before the pandemic. So this wasn't something that you just stumbled into as a result of this pandemic. This is something that your family chose to do many, many, many years before it. For those who are walking into this and they're trying to figure it out, do you have any advice on how to also keep your home safe while you're homeschooling? Because there still is a pandemic that's going on. Were there measures that you guys put in place as you were homeschooling to keep yourself and the kids safe, if there were anyone else in the house that was leaving out to go to work, or if you're having guest teachers who are coming in? How do you deal with COVID while you're homeschooling?
Well, once COVID happened, all of our co-ops stopped. The co-ops went virtual, just like a lot of schools did. And so we were home. The good news for us is that we've been doing this for all these years. So we knew the drill of what to do. So the kids and I were not going out of the house. Really, my husband was the only person who was going out of the house, and he was making sure, that he masked and he washed up when he came home and all of those things. The thing about COVID, so most homeschoolers, a lot of people worry about, if they homeschool their child, will their child have enough opportunities to socialize with other people, right? What people don't know is that homeschoolers are constantly socializing with other people, to the point where when COVID happened, we were like, wait a minute, we can't go to the park, we can't go to the museum, we can't meet up with it was like all the things that we spend all our time out of the house doing, we couldn't do. And so I think that part was challenging for us. So a lot of that stuff moved online. And so we were able to sort of keep the kids safe, keep the kids home. And if there was some socializing that took place, it would be outside.
Okay. And so even with that, was there a requirement, now that COVID hit, was there a requirement amongst the co-op parents to say, we have to get our children vaccinated, or was that a personal choice? How did you all deal with that aspect of it?
So we're starting a co-op we're in the process of starting a Black-led co-op now. We're opening in late August. It's called Kindred Homeschool Collective. Me and 3 other moms got together and said, we've had our children in co-ops in where we were the only Black family in most of the co-ops, and now we think we want something different for our children. So we're having to really think deeply about how do we make this thing happen for our kids, given the Delta variant and all of those things. And so we're actually in active meetings about that, creating our own COVID policy with regard to masking and social distancing. We're blessed in our community to have a nurse who's one of the moms in our co-op and a woman, a public health specialist in our co-op. So along with them, we're formulating our plan to so that the kids can have the opportunity to meet each other and learn from these awesome classes and not have to, and also for the parents. Honestly, it's really about us parents getting together, as Anthony was saying, and talking amongst ourselves and sharing informal mentorship opportunities.
Beautiful, beautiful. And
Anthony, let me ask this question, Anthony. When I think of homeschool, my mind is so antiquated of just thinking, mom or dad is there in the house, in the home, and they're just drilling this into the child. The child never leaves the house. They're just being subjected to schooling this whole time. So under this new homeschooling concept, how is social interacting integrated into the homeschooling aspect of your child's education?
So I can only speak to this from being a center who's been involved in some of the enrichment portions of this. But when I just want to double down on something that Sister Adrienne said earlier around the socialization side. It is a complete fallacy. It's a myth that homeschooled children are less socialized or are more socially awkward. It doesn't pan out in any real research, even though anecdotally you may hear it from some educators. I'm sorry, that's just not the case. When kids come to us at the Center for the African Diaspora, they're not any less socialized. Actually, what we find is that the more intricate socialized skills, the deeper ones that actually matter long term, we actually see the homeschool population of the kids who come to our center excelling. They're the mediators. They're the folks who get the deeper social emotional pieces that are there. So I need to underscore that. So we just don't see that assumption there. In terms of the quote unquote drill and kill, again, we see this as a practice more indicative of public school education than we do in the homeschool side. It just doesn't pan out, at least for the kids who come through the center and in our particularly our Black homeschool networks here in Minnesota. Folks stay together, they know each other, they connect across and are continuing. There's blackhomeschoolminnesota.com is a resource guide for Black families here in our space. And so I just want to push around that socialization myth that somehow only by sticking kids together in a school in a rigid schedule from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. is the only way that kids gain socialization skills. If that were the case, then folks in many schools wouldn't be paying so much money to try to train around social emotional learning help. And guess what? A whole lot of the homeschool folks and kids and parents can speak to that very easily. So I think that's an important thing to think about as well. The other piece that we have here is we have a strong park system. Sister Adrienne, I heard you talk about that park system. We have one of the strongest park systems in the nation here in Minnesota. And one of the things that you will find very often is homeschool networks, pods, cohorts, however, folks identify with them, making use of that in ways that is pretty extraordinary. So I can walk here in the state of Minnesota. I can, and I've seen this happen. I've been a part of these groups. We have a site called the Bedote. It's the sacred origin site of the Dakota peoples, the Native American peoples here in Minnesota. It's also the site for the concentration camp that was there. It's also the site of Fort Snelling, the first big fort in the state of Minnesota. It's also the site where the first Black flotilla of refugees came to Minnesota for community establishment, right? And so I'm sitting there with a group of pastors planning an international prayer service that's going to happen in a few years. And there's a homeschooling cohort pod of groups that are coming through, and we stopped and just listened, because as this group was coming through, I'm watching homeschool parents teach about the history that folks are fighting to get taught in our schools. So, there are so many things that happen in the homeschool spaces that we often will hold on to myths about, from socialization to what's actually covered. And I think, Sister Adrienne, you're doing an excellent job debunking some of those myths. The only other piece that I'll add real quickly is just that one of the things that we're thinking about is both myself and my wife have the ability, and I have this wondering for you, Sister Adrienne, about how work happens in this, because I think one of the other myths is that it takes one parent staying at home completely to do this. And we found, because we had the ability to work from home, that we just made a schedule, mapped out a schedule, and that was how we made that work. And we still were able to stay full time, especially now that more and more companies and offices are allowing folks to work from home. I'm wondering how that worked for you, because I've seen many creative ways that happened in the cohorts that I've seen.
Well, I work, so I still practice law. I work from home, so I practice law about 20 hours a week. One thing that people don't realize about homeschooling is that homeschooling does not take the long amount of time that a school day does, right? So people's kids are in school from 8 to 3 or something like that, and they're thinking, oh my goodness, if I homeschool, I need 7 hours worth of time in order to educate my child. That's just not true. There's a lot of time in school that is spent in non-educational time, right? We think about all the things that we did in school that were not time learning. So what I do to make it work, I get up early in the morning, as probably a lot of parents do. I get some time in with my work then. And then once my kids are up, we sort of have a relaxed schedule around here. Once my kids are up, we have our morning meeting. That's when we sit around the table. We talk, we sing, we read poetry, we pray, all that stuff. And then we talk about what's going to happen for the day. And then I'll work with them in their one-on-one things, especially for about the 12-year-old, maybe 2 or 3 hours, literally worth of work is probably a whole school day or more worth for a public school student. And then I usually spend the afternoons doing my work. And the kids at that time can be doing their individual subjects. They can be reading, doing some type of art. My youngest son is very into growing things now, growing plants and all of that stuff. Any of that. Because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to create independent learners, kids that leave this house and continue learning for their whole life, lifelong learners, right? Yes. Once you leave school, you no longer have teachers. You sort of got to seek out for yourself how to learn things. And the sooner I feel like a kid learns how to find information and teach themselves, the better off they are.
Well, Adrienne, I have some experience with the academies and I've been to the Coast Guard Academy in New London, right there on the Thames River. As a matter of fact, I was on one of the Coast Guard Academy's sailboats when Commandant Papp was the commandant of the Coast Guard. But and I really want to highlight the fact that your son got into the Coast Guard Academy, because that education is somewhere around north of $350,000, of which, if I'm not mistaken, you won't have to pay 1 penny for that education. Is that correct?
That's right. Yes. He has to do 5 years in the Coast Guard after he graduates. But yes, we do not have to pay that.
Congratulations.
Well, and what I was going to say is that Ben Dixon has been watching, and he said he's been very intrigued by all of the information that you've shared and would love to plug in, because shout out to his wife, Jada, who has been homeschooling their children and doing an amazing job. But Adrienne, as you pointed out, it really does take that collective and that cooperative. So I hope that those of you who have been watching from home, what you take away from this conversation, if you're a parent, is that you have options, that you don't have to feel pressured into sending your kids back to school and dealing with all of the vaccinations. And I think that this is the perfect time. You guys know that we're on the clock, and my kids are waking up. So we're going to head out. But if you're watching, stick around for more on the Benjamin Dixon Show. I believe Noah Changa is filling in again today. You guys have a wonderful day. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.